Hello and welcome. I'm really pleased that you've chosen to listen to and watch 2020 Coaching Convos with me, Julie Crabb. So you've joined me here in Series 5 called Case by Case, where I talk with guest coaches about their reflections from cases in their coaching practice. And before we start proper, and I do feel the need to say this on every episode, but in case you've joined for the first time, we'll be sure to uphold confidentiality in relation to our clients in all of our conversations. It's a really fundamental element of professional coaching, and about our practice and our ethics and our values. So you'll hear that. And what you'll hear is us sharing information about our coaching practice with clients, but none of it will be attributable to any individual with whom we have worked. I just feel it's really important to say that. Okay. So, most coaches are lifelong learners, and learning is one of my highest values and one of my drivers. And we're always looking to develop ourselves and to understand ourselves and to understand others. And I think there are great discoveries to be had from working with people that we coach. So, we're going to be exploring what's learned from a single coaching case study, maybe from a type of technique or a practice that the guests are keen to explore. And this week, my guest is someone that I met very briefly on a Coaching Catalyst's vision board event, of all places. She's currently in Albania and describes herself as a pilgrim, a writer, and a nomad. What a wonderful description. AKA the Globetrotting Coach. She is Amy Kranz of Clear Path Communications. So welcome, 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 Amy Kranz.
Thank you. Thank you.
How
It's a
you
real
doing?
joy to be here.
Lovely. It's lovely to see you again and looking so well after all your travels. So how are you doing today, Amy?
Doing all right. It's nice and warm here in Albania, so I'm quite enjoying the weather.
Good, good. I can see you got short sleeves and I'm just in t-shirt now as it starts to fall into autumn here.
Mhm.
Okay, so having spoken with you just once, Amy, we already established we've got several things in common, one of which is language, which I have no doubt we're going to dip into today. But before we dive into this and the case that you're bringing, I know that you've got a really fascinating background in international education and cultural communication, cross-cultural communication. Could we start, please, by just briefly hearing about how you became attracted to coaching?
Sure. Um, it came naturally through teaching. I have taught in 4 countries so far, um, as a high school or secondary education English and psychology teacher. So I've working with communication has always been an essential part. Again, because most of my students were second language learners um, right around the world. So when it came time to really examine, do I want to keep doing this or not? What I came to understand about where I was in teaching was I really like to help people. I'm a helper, I'm a fixer. It's a problem. Um, but what I can help my students with is passing exams. And that's not it, but that's the vast majority of what I can help them with. And that may or may not help them achieve their goals. As I explored, like, how can I continue to be a helper? Um, I contacted my friend in Australia who is a consultant and she's a professional storyteller. Amazing. She's like, well, I mean, just look, Amy, just explore. What do you like? See what that looks like. Um, so that's what I did. I took some time out and I thought, like, I like to help. Years ago, I made a joke about one day I'm just gonna say I'm just gonna become a life coach and because I'm really good at telling people what to do. Julie, it turns out that telling people what to do is not what coaching is about.
Certainly isn't.
So I pursued coaching because I was ready to stop teaching in a traditional classroom. And that's when I learned that coaching is so much more and so much less than telling people what to do. Um, and and it a little bit blew my mind, and more than that, it blew my perspective of how we can help people, and how we can, this is my thing, right? How we can communicate just better and in a way that actually reaches our audience. I'm not always successful at it, but I do enjoy the exploration and the experience. And so that's how I got into coaching. A shift from teaching to coaching is a very simple shift, especially if you do training and mentoring within the classroom, within a school, as I did. So that's where it came from.
Fantastic, fantastic. And 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 the helping and the fixing struck me, but also you dropped it's a problem, and it made me think about a conversation I had yesterday with somebody about how qualities that can be our strengths can also be our weaknesses. Yeah, fascinating. Okay, I want to talk to you separately about professional storytelling too, because that fascinates me.
Yeah,
Okay, so let's move to thinking about a specific area, then a specific case perhaps. And I'm interested when we explore this to see what we can learn about maybe clients and their roles in coaching,
mhm.
coaching skills and techniques, your particular style as a coach, and if there are any particular kind of aspects or topics that the case study that you're bringing kind of brings to our learning. So, can you tell us a bit about what you are focusing on? What had a strong impression in your mind?
Absolutely. Um, Again, because of my lifestyle and because of my history, I do cross-cultural communication is my number one focus within coaching, especially when I'm coaching within education. I do coach educators out of education, but I also coach school leaders and organization leaders into primarily clearer and better communication across cultures. I've worked in international education, and quite honestly, you don't even have to work in international education to have a multicultural classroom or a multicultural institution. So making sure that what we think is clear is also clear to the people we're communicating with um, is really the heart of what I do and kind of how I coach as well as why I coach. I'm not sure that actually answered your question.
It does actually, and it brought to mind for me a really fascinating documentary I saw about how a number of people were moved into, I hope I'm going to say this correctly, into special needs education because of a failure to communicate well. It
Hmm.
wasn't the young people's failure to communicate well, it was the educators and assessors' failure. So I think part of the assessment involved the word force. And these people didn't, the people taking the assessment didn't understand that word. And so they failed and they were assumed to be stupid rather than that they didn't, they had not been communicated to
Right.
successfully enough. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So is there a particular client that you've worked with or a program that you've worked with that would pull out some of the cross communication skills that you think are significant?
Absolutely. I have a few school leaders in my head as I think
Oh,
about this, but quite recently, actually, I worked with a school leader, and that's the end of that information, who is foreign to where he was working, who is British, and his colleagues were primarily local to the country where he worked, which was not in Europe. So immediately multicultural steps, right? Um, And one of the things that he experienced was always trying to be the most patient, always trying to serve and come at school leadership with a servant mindset, which is brilliant, quite honestly. It's not something that always comes up in a school. Oftentimes, and I'm sure that whatever, I've done this myself. We don't come in as servants, we come in as leaders. Just listen, just do what I say. And this was not his perspective at all. However, events happened and he lost his patience and did um I will say shout at a colleague in front of other people. That colleague and other colleagues who were there did not respond well, of course, and when we talked about this situation in our coaching session, his his response was, of course I apologize for losing my temper, but, and I'm sorry, but is never I'm sorry. It's this is secretly your fault and you should know better. And that we all know it when we hear it. We all know it when we receive it. But when we're saying it, we don't realize we're trying to explain why this event happened, lost my temper, shouted, rather than apologize and just be wrong. We don't like, who likes to be wrong, Julie?
Certainly not
I
me.
don't. So we talked through like, how do you communicate across cultures when the problem, the challenge that created the situation is a cultural mindset issue, and your response is your cultural mindset issue, but it is not received in that way. So we explored. Now, the way I coach, Julie, is really it's just a com I shouldn't say just. I'm working on my own communication as well. Is a
I like
conversation,
the check.
we have a chat, we talk. I ask questions. They're not always gentle. I never tell my clients or potential clients that I'm a gentle coach because I'm not. It's a real challenge in the UK. I don't have a gentle approach. Um, but I do have an honest approach, and my approach is let's understand what's happening beneath the surface for all of the participants, not just you or me. So I ask questions, and sometimes they're targeted questions like, was that the right time? And these are yes, no questions. As you know, Julie, we don't ask yes, no questions in coaching, but yes, we do. I do. And was this the right time? How do you know it was the right time to communicate your reasoning for your behavior? Was that reasoning received? They are targeted questions, they are direct, and they're also important in the perspective shift that is necessary in cross-cultural communication, especially leader to employees, and especially in a situation where there is a history of colonialism. As a white American English teacher, the history of colonialism is vast in my work, and it's my responsibility to recognize that. And as I worked with this school leader who had been in country for 20 years at that point, it's easy to forget that our underlying values and worldviews are still underlying even after 20 years. So looking for other people's perspectives through targeted and less challenging questions is really how we explored the situation of losing the temper and the fallout of losing the temper and other options. You've lost your temper, that's done. I'm sorry, but is the situation we need to look at now. So so that's the situation that I have seen played over and over again in cross-cultural situations as well as in single culture, but age culture differences in families, in small communities. It just keeps playing out
Mm,
because we're not hearing or we're not seeing what other people are hearing.
mm.
It's normal.
Wow, there is so much in what you've just said,
I do
Amy.
talk a
And
lot. Sorry.
no, it's very rich, and I wrote so many notes because actually, what really struck me was this is all about paying attention, and I found myself paying strong attention to what you were saying. Um, so early on in what you just said, you were talking about leadership and how this guy chose the style of serving, and that all on its own made me think, wow, there are cultural differences in how we approach that too, isn't there? Like I would say in our British culture, we're not natural servers. Um, so yeah, it's a style that needs training or exploring, experimenting with.
Yeah.
And yeah, that whole thing about the but, I've learnt from my own training that and replacing it with an can be much better. Yes. um, yeah, and then you went on to talk about how your style of coaching, and I can see that necessarily it has to be this way, is direct and to be clear, and that's a challenge in the UK. Could you say a bit more about how we could apply in coaching some recognition of our own cultural style in speaking and the understanding of the client's cultural style and speaking? And how does that work? I was thinking, is it okay, is it enough to say to the client, this is my style of speaking, let's see what how we can negotiate with each other about how we communicate? How does it work?
I mean, absolutely. Yes. Number one is to recognize, like I recognize, and I say, and I really recognize this when I lived in China. Look, I'm very American. I need you to be direct. It's okay if it's not a pleasant answer. I need the unpleasant answer because I still to this day, 6 years in China, 9 years working with Chinese people, and I still to this day cannot visually recognize the yes that means yes versus the yes that means no. And in many cultures, it's a little bit more understandable, but in that one, for me, I still struggle.
Mm,
Um, so I do say, like, look, this is how I'm speaking. If it is a problem for you, I need you to tell me. I welcome your feedback. And one of the ways I do that is instead of saying, do you have any questions? I say, what are your questions? I make the assumption that there is an issue or a misunderstanding or a miscommunication um, that needs to be clarified. And absolutely, as a more roundabout communication style at traditionally in the UK, not everywhere, definitely not universally, but much more than my approach, at least. I think it's valid and important for us to openly recognize our own worldviews and our own approaches and offer the opportunity for our clients, whether they are cross-cultural because they come from a different country, language, religious background, whatever, or they're cross-cultural because they come from a different part of society than we do, because cultures can be microcultures. Um, we give them the opportunity to say, when you do this, it makes me think, or when you say this in this way, I don't know what you mean. And sometimes we have to model that, even amongst adults. Like, okay, so when you said this, I understood this. Is that because we're having a language difference or a cultural difference, or am I on track? Um, Modeling, asking for clarification also gives our clients an opportunity to ask for clarification or to say, I don't understand you, or to say, that was a very uncomfortable question. Because of course you can. This is coaching. This isn't the confessional. You can say what you need to say. That's how we're going to move forward. So
mm,
I like one of the best ways to do that is to say it out. And yes, then to model the opportunity to ask questions.
mm. That's incredibly clear. Thank you so much. And I'm definitely going to adopt your style of asking for feedback. What are your questions? I think that's superb. Um, what else did I write down? Um, oh yeah, it reminded me as we were talking about the NLP presupposition. I'm not going to say this perfectly, but it's something like the communication is the response you get, so that we are responsible for the understanding of the person we're communicating with. How does that land with you, Amy?
I'm sorry, there's just a truck going by with the speaker. Can you repeat that question? I do
Sure,
apologize.
no problem. It's funny. Lots of people say, "Oh, I've got something going on in the background, and I can never hear it," but forget that actually it's disturbing their concentration. Yes. So, what was my question? That's right. I was thinking about the NLP presupposition, which is goes something like the communication is the response you get. so that we as people communicating a message are responsible for the way in which it's understood by the person we want to receive the message. How do you feel about that? What's
I do, sorry for the glasses. I do think that that is true to a larger extent than we take responsibility for as regular humans. Um, if I'm not communicating to you in a way that you understand, then I'm not communicating to you. I'm just making noise. And I mean, I like the sound of my voice, but that's not the same thing as communication. So I do agree with that. I'm not super up on NLP. Like I've done some reading, but I have not been trained. So yet it's on my list for next year. So, but the presupposition that communication is my responsibility if I'm trying to communicate something is essential. And especially, again, going back to that cross-cultural, multicultural context, if you don't understand me, getting louder isn't going to help. I'm here in Albania, and the younger people speak English quite fluently. The older people might have a few words. So when I'm communicating with people my age and older, like I'm an older person, I know it, um, I will simplify my language. I'll I won't use the function words that are not necessary, the thes especially. Um, and I'll use one instead of a. One nectarine and do more pointing because communication means you have to get the message. If I say I want one nectarine and you give me 12 bunches of celery and a potato, there has not been successful communication. You know, and this is so much more important in coaching where we are working with mental health. We are not mental health practitioners, but we are working with mental health. And if I communicate in such a way that you are no longer able to communicate with me, you feel unsafe, you feel wrong, and you feel wrong to the point where you can't correct or change direction, then I'm not doing my job. In fact, I'm causing harm. It's so much easier to make those mistakes in a cross-cultural context. But if I start by trying to communicate in their language, and I'm putting that in quotation marks because, again, my Chinese is minimal. I can get myself into a conversation that I can't get out of in Chinese. I have teacher Arabic and I have tourist French and Spanish, just enough to be a problem. I'm definitely not talking about communicating, fluently in Albanian because again, I know one word. Um, but using the tools that I have access to, which does include adjusting my language for my audience. It's the same way we do storytelling, right? We tell picture book stories to young children. We read novels as adults. Story's the same. The moral, the lesson, the events of the story are the same. But I'll tell you what, reading, The Dream of the Rood in Old English versus reading a modern translation or not translation, but whatever. It's accessible or it's the work of an academic. And we have to remember that when we're communicating with our clients, when we're communicating across cultures, um, that they need to get it. I don't need to get it. I already got it. That's why this is my job now. And you're coming to me because you think I've got it. So I need to make sure that you get it. Client A, teacher X, whatever. My job is to make sure that you know what you need. So yeah, long answer for a short question.
long answer, but again, really rich, Amy. And I'm watching the time and starting to feel quite frustrated because I think there's so much more that we could be talking about here. But I wonder if one way of summarizing the learnings that we've been discussing would be if I could ask you to perhaps pull out 3 or 4 key tips that you'd give to maybe a coach or somebody practicing other types of talking interventions that would be enablers for them as communicators cross-culturally?
Absolutely. First is something that Zoom actually does for us, which is to get on a level playing field. If I'm sat behind the desk and you're sat in the visitor's chair, we are not level, we are not equal. This is me telling you what to do. Whereas if we're sat at a kitchen table or a cafe, or we're both sat on a floor, I don't know, it doesn't matter. We are visually and physically equal. We want to be equal. I'm not the teacher anymore. You're not the student. We are peers. I'm going to support you in what you want. So, number one, be visually equal. Number two, I would say is again, express clearly from the beginning. How do you want to be coached? And if the answer to that is, what do you mean? Valid. Um, do you like interruptions? How do you respond to redirection or anything like that? So that do you prefer gentle, quote unquote, correction? Whatever. Ask the client or clientele, what do you want? Because I'm here to help you. Doesn't matter what I want. What do you want? Remember it.
Yes, that's so key, isn't it? It's all people asking, but
Yeah,
you need to
it's
apply
not a
it.
tick box exercise. You actually have to act on the information. And the third one, I really think comes down to authenticity, authentically trying to understand where your client is. Again, especially in a cross-cultural context, do a little reading. Find out, do a little, I mean, we have YouTube. Watch some YouTubes, understand a little bit about how that society or that part of society tends to communicate to the best of your ability. Sometimes we don't know until we get there, and that's okay too. But again, with authenticity, acknowledge errors, speak clearly, and give the client the opportunity to say no. No, I don't like it when you ask me direct questions, Amy. It feels very targeted. Fair. Okay, let's explore that so that I can make a better choice that supports you without catering to your feelings to the exclusion of supporting you. Your feelings matter, but your feelings aren't why I'm here. Your feelings are a part of you and a part of your response. So let's make sure that we utilize them, but they don't direct our work. Because if our feelings were what directed everything, I probably wouldn't be here. It's hard. So, um, but give them opportunity to say, I don't like that, and model it if you need to, as discussed earlier.
Fantastic. So level playing field, uh, finding out what the person likes or wants in terms of how they want to be communicated with. So
Mhm.
it's really kind of teaching each other how to communicate with each other,
Yes,
and authenticity. I love it, Amy. Thank you so much. So
absolutely.
time has totally run out on us today. Thank you so much for guesting on Case by Case,
Sure thing.
Series 5 of 2020 Coaching Convos. And just one thing before we go, could you please tell us how you can be contacted so that guests can reach you?
Absolutely. I've sent you my links, but I will share them again. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's Amy-Kranz, Kranz. That's probably the best place to find me. I am starting up my business page on Facebook, and that's Clear Path Communications. And at which place I will be doing Friday freebies, and that's I totally want to invite your guest and your audience to join me for conversation, a little hot seat or spotlight coaching as needed, just around these kind of things, so that we can support each other moving forward.
Fantastic. We'll make sure we get your both your contact details and those Friday freebies in the episode description. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much, Amy Krantz of Clear Path Communications, CPC. I like that.
Hey.
And thank you to listeners and watchers. And if you like what you hear and see today, please subscribe and share and tell me what you want to hear more about in 2020 Coaching Convos with me, Julie Crabb. Until next time.